Hello there. We're back with another episode of the Star Wars CCG Market Report. We do this show to show you what the prices are, what you should pay for something, what you shouldn't pay. We hope to create some price transparency, build new resources for players and collectors, and just talk about where we think things are going. So I'm joined by Mark, Greg, and Cam. Say hello, guys.
How's it going?
Hey, everybody.
I think everybody should know this crew. It's the same crew from last time, but each of these guys has been around and brings a really unique perspective to this, and I'm really happy that they agreed to sacrifice their evening and talk about cards. So I think we're going to turn to Greg first, but it seems like we're kind of hitting a little bit of a bear market here. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but it feels like things have slowed down a little bit, particularly sales of sets, and maybe you have some sort of observations that you've seen.
Yeah, so happy to chat about it. If you want to pull up that screen share of mine.
Sure.
I could talk over that for a sec. So basically just sort of reporting in on what happened since last time. Looking at the data, there hasn't been a significant overall change in set prices. What you can see here, the blues are the prices for quarter one and quarter two for each of these sets. The red bars are the prices over the last couple months. We're not exactly a full quarter three because we're doing this a month early. But you can see that there's been very little change. The total average for the non-foil, non-white border sets over the last couple months is down about 3 to 4% from the average from the first half of 2022. Some sets are slightly up, some are slightly down. The biggest decreases are in the Ref 1 foil set, then Ref 3 Premium and Death Star 2 as well. Those are down about 8 to 10%. We're working with some small sample sizes here, so I don't know exactly how much to take from that. But I think more than these general numbers, which seem okay, I think they mask a slightly more negative picture of the market. So ignoring maybe August just for a second, which there was a slight increase in sales. There's been, while the average prices themselves haven't gone down, the sale frequency has gone down quite a bit, or at least a sort of noticeable amount. Some of the and I could maybe shift over here to my spreadsheet without
we love a good spreadsheet, Greg. We always love a good spreadsheet on this channel.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, you can see over here in the Premier, New Hope, Hof Dagobah, the frequency of sales is still pretty decent. But Cloud City and Jabba's Palace are falling off. I know that seems like a lot, but those sets actually used to sell for more than any other sets. And Special Edition Endor, Death Star 2, Tatooine are really dropping off. And over here on the right side of the spreadsheet, it's almost empty. There just haven't been almost any sales of Death Star, Tatooine, Coruscant, Theed.
So hey, Greg, can I jump in with just a quick question here? So do you think that because the sets on the right side there, so the Theed, the Coruscants, the Reflections too, the foil sets especially, these are just high value items that folks are really hesitant to put it up either at an auction, right, which is where it's going to be a sale is guaranteed, or maybe they just is it truly too scarce, or are people kind of afraid? There's price speculation, right? So if I have an extra set of Reflections 3, I'm too much of a coward to put it up at auction because maybe it'll go beneath what I think it's worth, right? Is that kind of happening, or what's your opinion on why?
I mean, that's a good question. I think that might be what's happening, because if you look at what's available on eBay, all of those sets are actually available for sale. And even Ref 2 foil and Ref 3 foil, which is rare, those used to almost never pop up. So all of the sets that haven't been selling are actually available on eBay right now, above the average sale price, but not, and at least in a lot of cases, not a ton above the average sale price. So I think I don't have the answer, but I think your suggestion is a decent one, which is that people might be willing to put them up on auction, knowing for fear that they sell for a lower than average sale price. So yeah, that could very well be what's going on here. But so this is all just to say that these even though the averages haven't changed that much, there's a kind of dearth of data, and it's hard to say what will happen once these sales start going through.
Interesting. Let's turn just really quickly to maybe Mark and Cam and talk a little bit about grading, and we'll get back to kind of singles with Greg, but I think maybe this might be an interesting contrast with sort of what you guys have seen with the sealed and graded market. So sealed product, once again, product that's still factory sealed, or sort of graded cards, because I think there's an interesting contrast where there's been more data points perhaps. So
yeah, definitely. So while everything Greg said is very interesting on the and amazing work by Greg. Really respect him and everything he's doing. On the graded front, we're still seeing very healthy markets. And even growth in some instances. So am I screen sharing here? I have a couple examples we can go over. But
we love these charts and graphs. Right? Just put them into my veins. Just inject me with some charts.
Hopefully each quarter we do this show, it gets better and better. We're finally at a point we have enough sample size that we can do a chart. Some of these might only be, for sales. The problem with grading is it's hard to get the sample size sometimes because within just a Boba Fett, there's a PSA 8, a PSA 9, a PSA 10, a PSA 7, foil variants, non-foil variants, all those things. So I've got a couple interesting ones to look at over on the graded front. So first, like on a more a gloomy front, definitely wouldn't be using the word bear market. I think we're seeing very healthy sales, as you'll see. But here's an example of one where the Boba Fett PSA 8 foil peaked in February with a one spike 406 sale. I believe that was Mark. Was that a Darth Grader sale?
That was the Darth Grader sale.
Okay.
It's one of those things where you get a couple of people getting into it, and sometimes as many of you people who've sold on eBay before can attest to, sometimes two people just get into it and then the price just skyrockets, and it just happened to be one of those instances, I believe in hindsight, where it was one of those.
So, and you're going to see that in any industry. Just there's going to be outlier sales. I would point out also that I believe this was while the Boba Fett show was either.
I was about to say that.
Yeah.
Right. I think that was when Boba Fett was happening.
So there's a learning lesson in there, and that's partly why I wanted to include it. That sometimes this is a new era with Disney Star Wars shows, so you might see some outlier sales just with the hype during those. So, but that one is lately, it's kind of settled in, selling for $46 in September of 2021, settled in at a $50 floor, and it's back up to 100, dropped to 50, and it's back at 67. So, even if you average out this graph, it's still not a downward line, even with that crazy outlier sale, but there is definitely a decline there. Now, on the other hand, there's a lot of other cards. I'll go through these more quickly because they don't require as much context. You're just seeing a pure upward trend still, and these are going through sales. And we're covering quarter 3 on this show, so that September is not complete, but July, August, and September. So these are including recent sales at the end. So you're seeing a good graph for Boba Fett, PSA 8, Cloud City. PSA 9 stayed very flat for a while with a couple spike sales. But even you'll see in the safety and the graded sales, when it brings it back down, there's a healthy floor in a lot of these. And I think Mark can speak to that too, because he sells through his Darth Grader eBay platform probably more cards than anyone and understands the market better on a day-to-day basis. So he can speak to that. And we've been talking, and I know he said that the prices are staying healthy, if not growing. And we can see here that from July, there was even a spike in the Boba Fett 9 from 100 to 175. And we're seeing that again with just a couple more quick examples. Captain Han Solo, PSA 9, overall growth chart, small sample size, but we got a dip to 81, which is still way above the $20. This one had a really low sale in 2020, one of the first ever graded sales that we started tracking. But still well above those times, and then back to 152. And that's a very popular
I'm curious, could you comment a little bit on who is the average Star Wars CCG graded collector, right? I think that this is something this is still a nascent market. It's still something that's developing. And like, who are these people that are getting into this dead card game to then buy specifically graded cards, right? I think it's a really interesting intersection of, people that have been maybe collecting for a long time or Star Wars fans, but this is just seems like a difficult game to kind of stumble onto, right? So I'm curious if you have any insight into what like the average, buyer of these cards looks like.
Sure. Yeah, I would disagree that it's a difficult game to stumble on. I remember one point in the 90s, it was the number 2 most popular collectible card game behind just Magic, and it was ahead of Pokemon at that time. Might not have sustained that success, and obviously Decipher losing its license eventually doesn't give it quite the legacy that Magic and Pokemon have. But there are a lot of people I talk to through my interactions in this industry that you wouldn't think played this game growing up, but when they see it, they had those cards, they collected them growing up, or they played the game. Give your channel a shout out. One of the more insightful nuggets to me came when we were interviewing Chuck, and he talked about the Star Trek percentage. Star Trek CCG, they estimated that there were about 90% collectors to 10% players. So while Star Wars CCG has a very in the spotlight player group, and it is an awesome game to play, I still play GAMP and love playing, there's just a large market of collectors out there lurking. And what's interesting about this game is, and why Mark and I really saw it in 2020 and really started talking about it, is you didn't, even though it was at one time the number 2 most popular game behind Magic, there wasn't a ton of people grading it like you see with Pokemon and Logan Paul walking out with a gold chain with the Pokemon necklace on it. And like, no one thinks Star Wars CCG is going to get to that level, because that level is obviously ridiculous. But like, people love this game as a collectible, very similarly to Magic and Pokemon.
So I think for me, one of the reasons why I am generally bullish on Star Wars CCG as a game is it hits the trifecta, right? So I think whenever I evaluate a collectible, I think of these 3 things. First, does it have a utility, right? Like, is this a game you can play, or are you physically just collecting like little pieces of paper with like a famous person's face? Like, yes, this has utility, right? Like, you can play a game with your friends and there's cards that you want to collect because they're more rare or more powerful. 2, does it actually have substantial and real IP behind it, right? Like, this game has the sexiest IP arguably ever, like, behind it, right? Like, ever. Like, what is MetaZoo? Like, I don't understand it conceptually. I don't mean to keep on like ragging on it, but like, I don't understand why people would buy MetaZoo. Like, it's fake, or like Flesh and Blood, like, even Magic, right? So you got to read some like novels, right, to figure out what Magic is. There's no like blockbuster movie. Instead, you gotta like read about the plains of Dominera. But like, that's the second one. Like, this has such foundational IP, and sort of the third rule is, how does it look? And this game looks great. Like, everything about it looks great, and so it grades well. And it's the kind of thing you can stick in your mantle plate and be like, wow, that looks awesome. To have that one card on display, like, that's cool, right? So it hits all 3, and not all do. And anyways, I'm sorry. Please continue.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, thank you for bringing up those points. There's letterhead from Lucasfilm directly to the Decipher employees, congratulating them on working with them in this game. It's a part of Star Wars history. The lore is so fun. Back when you're playing, you could read the lore and learn about random Cantina characters in between turns. It's a part, in my opinion, I really believe it's a part of Star Wars history. And that's, and I couldn't agree more with the 3 points you just made. So I guess I'll wrap up. I just got a couple more charts to go over just to show the market. And, we've all been concerned about the market. I guess Mark, and we'll talk about that later, just because of the general state of the economy. But and we talked about this last time, this is a niche industry, and we're not seeing that because there's it's currently not at scale. There's a niche amount of buyers, so the floor is staying high, and there haven't been those bubbles that you get really scared of, like the Logan Paul Pokemon necklace chain aforementioned. So one of the most popular cards, Emperor Palpatine from the Death Star 2 PSA 8. So you'll see, yes, it's gone down from 700 second to last sale to 410, but that upward chart dating back to 2021 is still trending up, and there's going to be natural variance. This graph looks different just because these two sales are on the same date. But the Obi-Wan PSA 9 was at $169 and as recent as last Q2, April. And again, in Q2, it did drop to 103. And then we're having sales at 331 and 450. So agree with Greg's analysis, not arguing or not saying I disagree. I just think we're seeing some healthier action on the graded side.
Interesting. Greg, do you want to talk a little about AIs and ultra rares, and then we'll maybe go to the mark a little bit, and
yeah, that sounds great. Could pull up the spreadsheet. I have it on my screen. You're all welcome to look at it, or I can just look at my pretty face. It doesn't matter. The AIs, the ultra. So I also, on this spreadsheet track some singles, not all, but the ultra rares from DS2, the AIs from Coruscant and Theed, and ultra rare foils, and those have remained strong also this year. It's been also interesting to see sort of the progression of some of these over the last couple of years. So I've been keeping track of the ultra rares a little longer, but you can see back in 2019 here, the Luke Skywalker and Emperor Palpatine were a little over $100, $120, $130. In 2020, they jumped up to close to $200. Last year, they were starting to move up above 200, and this year they've continued to rise, averaging at about 250, 240. The foil versions of those have obviously been doing even better, even though pre-pandemic they were selling for less than their non-foil versions. So pre-pandemic, you can usually get Luke and Emp for about maybe 90% of their non-foil versions. During the pandemic, like all other foils, they just skyrocketed and started around 250 when I started tracking them, and now are sitting around the 350 average range and go up much higher than that on it. The foils and AIs really swing all over the place with the prices.
I feel like foils and AIs swing, but like truly the Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight and Emperor Palpatine are like bonds to me. Like it's like, all right, it's like $200. It'll be always $200. Like these are just cards that people need, that people want. They're iconic to collectors, or like it feels like the most like sound investment. If you can find one for $200, it's a great thing just to like store value. Right? Like,
yeah, very much. Oh, when I say swing, I almost mean they swing up. They rarely swing down, but every once in a while you get these like $500 sales or $600 sales. Rarely do you see them go for much lower than the average, unless they're like real beat.
And do we all think that's like a bidding war usually when we see that? Is that the general consensus, Mark, Greg?
Yeah, I don't often dig into like the bids to see like how it goes. Yeah, it's tough to know like what happens in some of these cases. Someone sets like a max bid and goes away, and someone else sets a max bid and goes away, and they're not really thinking about it. And then you get like two algorithms bidding against each other or something like that. So I don't know or sometimes, there's just, there's not one up for like a week or two, and, someone just really wants it and buys it, at a high price.
Yeah, I think for like certain cards, like especially LSJK and Emperor Palpatine, like if anyone's collecting or searching like eBay for cards, those are probably like two of the cards that everyone's searching for. So in that vein, it's really easy for it to, get a couple of people who want it, as opposed to other cards where you might be able to really easily snipe it at a really great price. It's probably very rare that you're going to be able to snipe especially nowadays, a Luke foil at, much below the going rate.
Those ultra rare, the Luke and the Emp especially, they continue to sell at such a high frequency compared to like any of the other big cards. It's really impressive. It's actually, this is maybe related to something we'll talk about, but I always wonder why more full Death Star 2 sets don't sell. And I sometimes think it's just there are too many people selling Lukes and Emps solo. And that explains, what's going on there. Let me say a couple things about the AI. You can see this little thing highlighted right here. So if you were looking for a full Coruscant AI set or a full Theed AI set, the prices have gone up a little bit in 2022 compared to 21, but generally you're looking between 12 and 1300 if you were interested in all the Coruscant AIs, and between 7 and 800 if you're interested in all the Theed AIs. That price is often driven by a few of the really big ones. So the Queen Amidala from Coruscant, last year was averaging a little under 300, and this year is averaging, over 300. The Darth Maul Young Apprentice is also the big one, and that set, last year was averaging about 250, and this year is up a little bit from that.
So can you why those two? Like, why Queen Amidala? Like, arguably Qui-Gon Jinn is like a very iconic character. Who doesn't love Liam Neeson? Like, why do you think those two of the 9 are, worth 2x, 3x of the rest?
Yeah, I mean, the Darth Maul one seems a bit easier to explain just because it's such an awesome looking card.
Yeah,
and I think it's
right.
a lot of people's favorite looking card. The Queen Amidala, I'm less clear about. I mean, I know some of you have some hypotheses about Natalie Portman signing cards again, but I think even before that, both the Queen Amidalas, the one from Coruscant and Theed, were selling pretty high, and yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Natalie Portman's a babe. That's my full hypothesis there. Natalie Portman's an absolute babe. No, but I do think I subscribe to the autograph theory. I think Natalie Portman started doing autographs again, and the autograph market, while it's niche, is niche enough to like drive a whole bunch of people wanting to buy a copy of these cards to get signed by her. I mean, I thought about it myself, and just say a couple, dozen people do it. I also think for the Theed one, it's just a good card that's needed in decks. So people will kind of look for either version of the Queen, I think, to use.
Yeah, and that's clearly the most expensive of the Theed AIs. Up around 200. The rest are about 100 or less. Interestingly, Boss Nass has had like a weird resurgence recently. Is now selling for over $100. The Boss Nass
Love
AI.
Boss Nass. Just gonna put it out there for everybody. Big Boss Nass guy. Misa love it.
Let me just say a few more things. So obviously the Ref 2, the Ultra Rare foils go for a lot, the Ref 2 ones and the Ref 3 ones especially. The Darth Maul Young Apprentice Ultra Rare foil just recently had its first over $1,000 sale. And when that happened, I think was the first maybe non-Japanese card to sell for over $1,000. But just 2 days ago, an Imperial class Star Destroyer tournament foil sold for $1,200.
I didn't even see that on eBay. I would have been into it. I didn't even see it.
It's the $1,200. That's the by far the most I've ever seen. Impressive.
I was thinking recently, I think that card is weirdly rivaling the Darth Vader premiere as the most iconic card, at least for hardcore players. Those in the know, like, you got to respect the ICSD tournament foil.
It's the perfect card for collecting because it's iconic. It requires an explanation of why it's rare, which is something that like you need that next level. It's like, why do people want like certain like weird niche things? It's like, well, you need an explainer to get to like why you want it. It's great. Like I wish I had more than one. Anyways.
The Corvette still seems to be lagging behind. The person who was selling the Star Destroyer, and there was a number of bids on it, went for 1,200. I think had put up a Corvette as well, starting bid at 700, and no one bid on it. So that that tells us. I think a few actually did sell for around that a few months ago, but I guess that tells us that the Corvette is still lagging behind the Star Destroyer.
As it should.
Yeah, that's right. But no longer the days where you can pull it for like $50.
Right.
Yeah.
Seriously. Yeah. On a serious note.
Well, Greg, this is awesome. I guess I have a few questions for Mark, actually. So Mark is our grading expert, and I was hoping to get in a little bit of, if you have some cards, what are the best cards to grade, right? Like, I think right now it may not be the Darth Maul AI. It might not be the ultra rares. It might just be premier cards, or am I wrong there?
Well, in terms of what you'd expect to get from a graded versus a raw card, yeah, I think you're right. The premier is where it's at, because I think back in the mid-90s when people got into this game, a lot of people got in this game when it came out. And premieres, of course, the set they remember collecting. So from that sense, that's one aspect. And then also, of course, being the first set, that's also tends to attract people as well. So yeah, I think you get a big premium there. And of course, the cards are difficult to grade as well. But certainly if you do have, like, let's say a foil Darth Maul Young Apprentice AI foil, you should definitely grade that regardless. But I think another aspect we touched on last time is the episode 1 cards, for whatever reason, you know, they sell for a decent amount raw just because they're fairly rare due to print runs, and you know, maybe we'll get into some of that stuff later. But the graded premium, so to say, multiplier is not as high as, let's say, for many of the original trilogy cards, just because I think a lot of that gets back to what we talk about, like the general collectability of these, their appeal as you know, art, wall ornaments, that sort of thing, which is also why many times how we touched upon, like, let's say the inversion of the foil LSJK selling for less and now it sells for more, is I think a lot of that is because a lot of the collectors are kind of getting back into it and they like the way that the foils pop. So we kind of see that as well with some of the sales, where even if, say, like, you know, you were to try to find a really mint non-foil version, people might still prefer the foil version just because it looks really nice as a decoration.
I also think there's like a general pop culture like reverence towards shiny things and like foils, right? And I think it comes a little bit from Pokemon, right? Where it's like the foil Charizard's that's the grail, right? I mean, but who doesn't also like a shiny thing? But I think there's just like, yeah, right. Like, of course. But I think that there's been a bit of an influence. Like, one of my theories is like everybody like was indoctrinated into thinking that like foil Charizards were the ultimate card, so foil other things must also be more valuable. Therefore, even though in Star Wars CCG it's like, if I told you a white border Commander Luke is more valuable than a foil Commander Luke, you'd be like, get out of here. Well, those are the unlimited ones. But no, I would take that trade any day, right? If you want to trade me a foil one, but I think it goes against sort of the conventional like mainstream wisdom of shiny equal rare or shiny equal good, right? But really interesting analysis there. So before we move on to sort of the questions from the audience, which we have some really good questions from the audience, I just want to note that we're going to have all these spreadsheets and tools available in the show notes. So guys, if you want to dive into Greg's or Cam's stuff, we really want these to be accessible and tools for everybody. Mark, yes.
There's one more thing. I'd like to get into the sealed first before we
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot sealed.
Oh, good. You can't forget sealed.
And I've got one super quick one.
All right, you go first.
I totally forgot. No, go ahead. I'll just do it at the end. It's just the top sale. People can
okay.
pause it and scan it. I don't need to talk.
All right, let's see. Let's see what we got here. Are you able to?
Sealed products are a really interesting market because it is so finite, right? It's like literally stuff that is irreplaceable at this point. So is this a scatter plot?
It is, and this is currently in development right now. So I hope to actually have it up in this server I'm building right here soon enough. So I actually had this up a little while ago. You might recall, I think maybe about last year at this time. Oh, sorry, there's mayhem going on in there. Fix that. Okay, so you can see here we have a lot of different, sealed products of your choice that have been color coded here. I hope to clean this up before I make it public, but you can see kind of up here, way up here, you have your Japanese Hoth box. You have, your Reflections 3 kind of up here, and a whole bunch of different sets down here.
Can you maximize this just like on the screen? Just
I wish I could, but the thing is, unfortunately, due to my lack of programming ability, it kind of does this.
Okay.
So
sorry.
I'll do my best. Let's see if I can get it a little bit better. All right, just have to do it a little bit at a time. Oh, no, I scared it too much. Okay, there we go. That's good. So yeah, for example, we can look at something like that's remained pretty consistent over time. Like let's say Endor. Endor is a set that's probably been about the same price for
about $1,000.
Yeah, a little bit around $1,000 for about a couple of years. Whereas let's say we made a note about I think it was Tatooine. Did we touch on that? Yeah, that's a box that's gone up a lot recently. You can see. A little bit over a year ago, it was around like say 300, a little bit over 300. There's a little bit of a dip, and then there's been some sales recently of 400 something, 500 something. So that's a set where it has a lot of main characters. So perhaps people who are collecting or perhaps grading have noted that. Let's see. Premiere. There's a lot of sale data for Premiere. Again, it's kind of stayed around 400-ish after there was a jump from around like 200-ish a couple of years ago, and then it went to like 300 to 400 and has kind of remained there for a while. But yeah, I hope to have this up soon along with the other tools that we have, just to see a more visual way of representing some of the data we're collecting.
This is great, Mark. Thank everybody who makes these spreadsheets and just does this like unpaid labor that like so I think sometimes is not thanked enough. Okay, Cam, did you want to quickly put up the sales sheet, or should we do it at the end?
I'll just do it real quick. People can
Sure.
pause it, and if they want to, these are the top sales. This is a quarter 3 market update. So these are the September is not complete, but the Q3 top sales to the point of it trending up. You'll see a lot of these top sales are in August and September. And to the volume note, just quick, you can pause it if you want to read the whole thing. I made this post in the Star Wars CCG graded group on Facebook. Please join. Great community, hardcore, small. Everyone's really nice. But the 18 in August, there were like 115 cards graded, and that's 18% of the total cards that Mark and I have been tracking since 2020. So admittedly small market, admittedly new, but the trend is upwards in both volume.
So just so I understand that stat, you're saying that 1/5 of all the graded sales happened in August?
Last month.
That's interesting, I think.
There's new sellers, there's new buyers. I mean, Mark and I I'm not trying to like toot our horns here, but like we were in early, just like we talked a lot in the early days because we just were like there wasn't anyone else to talk to, and now there's like a lot of people to talk to, and we're just anecdotally seeing a lot more people that are in the graded streets, like, and it's been fun, it's been awesome, and there's a lot more sellers, a lot more buyers, and that's anecdotal based on my experience. But here are the top sales. Pause it if you want to scan them. I didn't detect any patterns. Full disclaimer, the first one is a purchase I made. So, yeah.
Hey, I purchased some random Japanese cards today, so I get it.
Nice.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Cam. I think we're going to move on to some questions from the audience now. We have a lot of good ones, and the first one, and this is just for the group, whoever wants to kind of grab this, is a bit kind of dour. So we all know that there's sort of this recession talk in the air, or maybe that was a couple of months ago. So if we see a longer term recession, what's your take on Star Wars CCG or sort of the broader collectible market? Whoever wants to tackle this, I don't have a good answer. I only have bad answers, I think.
I could take this just because I've seen I actually call it a mini recession, kind of felt like we were going into recession, and maybe we still are, but it seems like, I don't know, at least to me, it seems like things aren't quite as bad as maybe they could be if we were going into, like, say, a 2008 type recession. I don't know if we touched upon this yet in our conversation yet, but in a lot of other collectibles markets, there were huge retraces, I think particularly in sports among some of the modern like set cards. There are some really, really large retraces. And then in Star Wars, we've had some retraces, but we haven't had anything quite like that. Like you saw in some of the sealed charts, they're just kind of continuously going across or even upwards. So I feel like, I don't know, Star Wars collectors are kind of a certain breed that just love to collect. And unless, we're having some sort of a Mad Max type of scenario, I don't see people fire selling their cards, unless they need to, like, I don't know, burn them for heat because everything is just collapsed. But I think, it might go down a little bit, it might stay flat, but I don't think, especially as people who collected this back in the day kind of come of age and have more money and more stability than they used to, that they're gonna like crash back to pre-pandemic prices. But that's, yeah.
So I actually think that I agree with your analysis, Mark. I think that COVID was, a hardship for a lot of people, and a lot of these people that might have just had collections they were sitting on for 10 years, they might have been shaken out because this was such like a difficult time for many people, right? Like, depending what industry you're in. So I think that a lot of the sort of like lower elasticity sort of buyer or sellers, right? That like, hey, like I've lost my job, I need to sell this for bills or whatever. Like those people have kind of like moved those collections out. I think there's just generally less product floating around in the wild. Anyone else have any thoughts on kind of this question?
I don't know where things will go, but what I can say is this: my 401k has lost a good 15 to 20% this year, and my Star Wars collection has not lost nearly as
that
much.
Literally might be, if I could pin a comment, that would be the comment I'd pin, Greg. Like right there, like I think you hit the nail on the head. Like I tell my friends that like I invest in collectibles, and they're like, are you crazy? I'm like, you invest in a fraction of a company that you don't understand why it goes up or down, right? Like it's like they beat expectations this quarter, so the stock went down 10%, right? Like that doesn't make any sense. But this we can all understand. We can talk about, we can study data. So 100% agree with you there, Greg. This kind of drives me to the next question that we got. It felt like during COVID, there's loads of new product being discovered in garages, basements, storage units. And do you kind of feel like this period of discovery is over for the game, that most of the people who had giant collections sitting in a storage unit or in their basement have made a decision, and that this has sort of tightened the market, right? I always joke that the greatest phenomenon is the American garage, right? Like what people find in their garages blows my mind. And I'm wondering if like truly at this point, like we're reaching a point where like there's no more case of Hoth sitting in some guy's garage because it's been cleaned out because of COVID, because of moving, because of aging or whatever. Like, are we kind of hitting this point where there's no more like mother loads of comic book stores that closed in 2004?
Mark? I feel like Mark's the most qualified.
Well, I don't know. I might not be. I actually don't buy too many collections, so to say, on eBay. But as far as just what I've seen, because I actually do like really buying sealed product. I don't know. I don't necessarily think that there won't be any more, let's say, garage finds in the future. Like maybe, if prices doubled again and then doubled yet again, I'm sure that would cause people to notice that at some point and be like, oh yeah, I have that, in my garage. There'd be always more people because the world's a big place. They'd find it. But certainly, I think like you guys touched upon, COVID was kind of like hopefully like a once in a lifetime sort of event. And that doesn't happen again, where a lot of people just were stuck at home, got nothing else to do. Like, oh, I've got all this stuff in my garage that's going up in price. Probably won't happen again to that level. But no, I think it'll continue to just trickle on because it's Star Wars and people kind of collected it back in the day. So there's probably just going to be a lot of people, even if it wasn't them, maybe it was a relative, a parent or something, and they had it there and it's just around. And then I think we were talking earlier about the Skywalker Ranch. So there's always a bunch of cases floating over there. So if we can't find it anywhere else, then maybe we have to go there.
Special ops mission. We're all going to go.
That's right.
We'll all get caught, obviously, as well, because it'll probably be very well guarded over there.
I guess I can say, to answer that anecdotally, for me, someone at Gerald in the Star Wars CCG group asked me recently when I started, and I played growing up, of course, but I didn't get back into collecting. I got the bug in 2017, just like randomly. It wasn't really related to the lockdown. So for me, it was just, this is the time I'm getting. I joined a local gaming store and started playing other games, and it reminded me of it. And I just got down the wormhole. Next thing you know, I'm buying Reflections gold cards from Michael Arisman through the Facebook group. So it was just random timing for me. I didn't need to be locked down personally. Obviously, as a macro zoom out level, it's a different story, but it can happen at any time for anyone. But that was my story.
I think that your point about prices driving up, like I do think that when stuff increases in price, it causes people to go looking a little bit, right? Like if you just have a thing that's $20, like, okay, I'll just leave it there. But if it's $2,000 for Premier Box, you're going to go looking a little harder for this stuff. So I do think price increases drives it out.
100%.
So continue along our question list here. So this one's from Parker, I believe. So what externalities would you think have to happen to drive the market down to a non-financially viable state? Maybe all the cards don't go to zero, but value creators and anyone buying from 2020 to 2022 better have done so for personal enjoyment. Or sort of the opposite of this, where all the big cards, ultra rares, AIs, episode 1, complete sets, go for 5x, 10x more than they are right now. So, what's going to lead to either absolute catastrophe or, an insane increase that's going to change the market as we know it? Like, I think he's kind of asking about these two extremes. And I have a theory, but I'll let the group go first before I share my theory.
I mean, I could talk on this one again, but I don't want to monopolize the time.
I don't know if I understand the question.
So what's going to lead to like, sorry, what's that, Greg?
I don't think I have an interesting thought here. So yeah.
So I think it's like, what's going to lead
either what would go that or
like
to the moon? Like what would cause it to crater or what would cause it to go to the moon? Is that essentially what they're asking?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
So I think, for the cratering, I think Disney releases a new Star Wars game and very like, well, if they very fastidiously go after old IP and shut down the PC because they're, using a 23-year-old agreement, right? And are just like, we don't want anything else out there like clouding our IP. Like, I think that could hurt the value, right? Because it's going to make it only collector focused, or it could also help maybe, right? I don't know. It's just a theory. That's one theory I have of what could crater it and what could increase the value. Just this catching on with any sort of influencers. I mean, this channel has like 400 followers or something, but like one with 4 million followers picks it up, you're going to have a whole new generation of collectors.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're seeing that with the PC. They're doing a great job of getting, there's, high school groups playing. And I don't think the game, like Gemp's going to keep the game energized 20 years from now, per se. I think, I hope it does, but I think I own 1970 Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi Topps 1977 PSA 10s that I wasn't alive for, because it's the history of Star Wars, and it's an amazing game, or it's an amazing franchise. So I think, I don't know. I don't see any like realistic, go to zero scenarios. Other than just time and life
of
itself.
Like plateauing, right? Like if anything, we might see a little dip or a plateau, but I don't feel like just a cliff, right? There won't be another cliff of the print runs gone, like everybody flee like rats fleeing a ship or something. I think people will die off as time passes, but there's no like impending doom, at least not in the next 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, that's a better way of putting it. I agree.
Yeah, if we're gonna think into the 40-year time frame, like, man, I'm worried about everything in 40 years, let alone my paper.
Exactly.
I have many things to worry about in 40 years.
Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of things. Yeah, needless to say, a lot of things can change in 40 years, and I think the kind of how we feel is the to the moon, so to say, is much more likely than like a meteoric fall to being worth like essentially the same as paper scraps.
Right.
Because I just don't. I think Star Wars as a phenomenon is so far beyond even if the game like got shut down or something, there's enough is historicity a word? Just enough people who played in the 90s that have an attachment to the game, even if it was like officially just like not even playable now legally by Disney, if they could do such a thing. I don't know.
I do think if the game became unplayable and Gamp was shut down, you would lose, there would be a whole generation of players that just got rid of their stuff, right? Because the utility of this game is not the collecting like it is for us, but it's the playing, right? I mean, of course, you can still play over the kitchen table and stuff, but Disney agents kicking down the door, confiscating your collection, right?
That makes it more exciting too.
Right. No, it's like, it's showing it to it in secret.
A reboot of this game in any form, or just any Star Wars card game that becomes popular, would just raise this market with it. But and Gemp, to your point, is good for everyone. And I donate to the Players Committee specifically to boost Gemp.
Same, absolutely. Okay, guys, moving on to the next question here. What do you think about the autograph market as conventions kind of open back up and there's more availability? So you think about autographs, for a long time, you just couldn't go to a convention, COVID. Do you think this is going to kind of drive things up by giving more exposure and, people thinking about this more, or maybe the opposite by creating more supply of signed cards? I'm a big fan of autographs. I think they're only going to go up as people continue to pass away. I think it's a fascinating market. I want actors to scribble on my cards. That's what I want. Anyone else have any thoughts? Greg, do you do autograph stuff at all, or?
I don't, but I do see autographing and grading as, this is something I mentioned last time, and I had perfectly described myself with this, and Cam, if I remember correctly, in terms of like watching the progression of how people came back to the game and which sets, were selling, and how it started with the OT sets and then the episode 1 sets and then the foil sets and the AIs. Once everyone's got that, where else do you go? It feels like grading and autographing is sort of like a natural progression. I myself haven't done it yet, but it does seem like when you've got everything and you're still into the, collecting and wanting to go further, that does seem like a natural next step.
I totally agree. Untapped market. I think we'll see it grow as time goes on. I wish I had more autographs myself.
And there's a number of services that have popped up. I just used one called Official Picks to get Senator Palpatine AI signed, which is just a cool card. Because I mean, the actor Ian McDermott's like, I don't know, like 82 or something, right? So I was like, okay, I'm going to get this while I can. Okay, kind of moving on to our last few questions here. Japanese cards, feels expensive to even say that. Do you think that low supply is undercutting demand? So thinking of it this way, they're so inaccessible that the average collector won't even bother. Do you think there's other cards that are kind of approaching this? I mean, like, for example, a Japanese Vader just never comes up, right? And therefore, it might feel not possible to collect a Japanese premiere set. And therefore, I won't even start it, right? Because it feels so daunting. So do you think that this is something that might be kind of happening that's stifling demand? This is a tricky one. There's no easy answer here.
I don't think that's quite. I mean, part of it's just because, you know, Japanese for the majority of collectors here is probably something that, you know, it's hard to read the card. So, you know, if you collected like Darth Vader back in the day, and it's like, well, the Japanese Darth Vader is much rarer, it's probably only a certain small subset of people who'd even want to go after that to begin with, just because, I mean, it's just a niche sort of a thing. I don't know if it's because it's rare, like, that would make them not want it. If anything, they'd probably want it more because of that. And that's probably why they'd go after it. Because if it was just as common as the English one, they'd probably be like, oh, well, maybe I'll go after it. But I think it's the rarity that actually makes it more interesting rather than less.
It just does feel so daunting. As someone who owns very little Japanese stuff, it feels like an impossibility to find a couple, like, you know, some of the Japanese Hoth rares.
Yeah.
We've talked about before. It's like, I don't even want to start a Japanese Hoth set because I won't be able to finish it. Right. And
there's some truth to that. And I'm as hardcore as it gets, but I hit a wall after my 2017 US Master set. I'm like, I'm not doing Japanese, like F that. And now I do have a New Hope Japanese sealed box and a Premier starter deck sealed, but even I'm drawing the line. I do have all the mains, but I don't have the complete sets, and I don't have the Hoth box. Shout out Andy. And one of my other friends has one. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting you. Jamie and Andy are the only two people I know who have one. So, you know, as much as I want to disagree, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And it's hard to get a Hoth box, and Serge has a Premier box that I've been talking to him about, and I just can't pull the trigger right now. It's a lot of money, you know, it's a lot of money.
So I'll also note, like, to the second part of this question, is undercutting any other markets. I actually think this is happening with, you know, Reflections 3 foils as well, where they just don't come up, like, full sets don't come up for sale very often, and therefore it leads people to think, like, I'm not going to bother with the episode 1 stuff, right? Like, I'm just not. It feels, you know, like, if you collect up to Death Star 2, like, you can find those sets regularly on eBay, but like, how often does a Theed AI set come up for bidding? It's like once every quarter or something. I mean, Greg would probably know.
I mean, a set of AI almost never comes up. You know, they really never even did. It's, you know, the singles have always been where it's at for the eyes. I think maybe a few years ago you'd see a set every once in a while, but it was pretty rare.
So definitely interesting question to kind of noodle on. I'm gonna maybe think about that a little. Yeah. All right, last question. What are your predictions for the rest of the year regarding the market? Let's start with Greg, and then Cam, and then Mark.
I don't know. I don't feel my spreadsheet's so backwards looking. I don't feel qualified to say anything forwards looking, but I did mention that while there was a slowdown in set sales, like, across the board, this last month saw an increase in the earlier sets. I don't know what that means. So I don't know if that mean, you know, the way, if it's just like a kind of cycle, the way it happened before, it would mean that, you know, the later sets are going to follow again. And there's just kind of like, for whatever reason, things slow down and they pick up again, starting from the beginning, and then move through, you know, the set releases. But yeah, I beyond that, I don't feel comfortable speculating very, very much.
Very safe. What about you, Cam?
So in grading, it's interesting. So I'll be very interested to watch the PSA $18 returns if that has any substantial impact on demand. These charts I'm showing you earlier sometimes are just for sales over the course of a year. So you have to factor in that context that there's not many Obi-Wan PSA 10s, or I don't know what the population is. And the Obi-Wan PSA 9 graph I showed you had 4 sales. Here's a 5th one, probably population 25 card. I'm interested to see how the $18 PSA returns, if they have any demand impact, if there really are people. Anecdotally, Mark and I are seeing a lot of new sellers, a lot of new buyers, and a lot more activity. So I'm, outside of that the PSA $18 returns, I think the U.S. economy is bad, so it's going to be a little bit of what the graphs I just showed you, hold water, little variance. But overall, I think we're going to see an upward trend, but nothing that's, quite like this until the economy maybe stabilizes, with the asterisk of, are we actually going to see a demand boost from this massive PSA 18 promotion?
Yeah, if I had to place a bet, if I had to pick up or down, I guess I'd be more leaning up towards down. Although, again, kind of like I think Cam and Greg noted, maybe not like too much growth. I mean, it's stochastic, so sometimes there can be blips up, but I think it kind of trends towards a slow upward growth over time. Actually, there's a channel, I think it's Action Figure Grader. He did a video actually on Star Wars card collectibles and getting into Star Wars graded CCG cards. And I think there's a lot of broad appeal to both Star Wars collectors in general and, let's say, graded card collectors in general, which by and large are sports collectors, but there's a lot of overlap there. And the market just, I think, has a lot of potential that hasn't been as of yet fully realized to where maybe it would be if it were otherwise. And I think that'll continue to grow as the market continues to develop and people get more of their cards and they just get out there. So people look at them and say, oh yeah, I used to play or collect that back in the 90s. And then it just grows naturally because of that. So I think because, as you touched on, because of the fundamentals here, it'll just continue to grow at a healthy pace.
And I'll just add real quick, PSA 10s are so hard to find and such unicorns that they're just going to do this.
Oh, yeah, like for sure.
PSA 10s just are the safest by a mile.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this is all really interesting insight. And so I guess I'll give my take at this. I was part of the collector class of 2020. So I was a COVID guy, collected as a kid. And I think with that, I found maybe 5 or 6 peers that were also COVID collectors that came in for this. And all of us have kind of graduated in the last 6 to 8 months where we hit, Premiere, through Coruscant and adding in the AIs and adding in Theed and adding in foil reflections. And so I think a bunch of these collectors from COVID have graduated, right? So there's no longer, in my opinion, this big demand for sets. But this COVID class is still interested in singles. The AIs that Greg is describing, the ultra rare foils, the sort of big chase cards will always be chased by collectors, even if they have their master set. My hypothesis is no one's chasing 6 premier sets, right? No one wants 12 Jabba's Palace, just, complete sets, because they're heavy. They take up a bunch of space. They're not really easy to display. But you might want your master set, right? So I think that there's going to be a whole generation of folks that have graduated, that if they have their master set, they're happy with that, and they're going to continue to chase select ultra rares or other chase cards and continue to kind of drive up the long-term value. That's my take. And also why I think that sets, until there's some event that's going to bring in another generation or another collecting class, things are going to kind of continue to plateau or be slow to sell, right? So that's kind of where I'm at.
The Mickey Mantle recent sale, the SGC 9.5 went for 12 million. So that backs up your chase card single theory being where the growth in value is a lot.
Yeah.
It all makes sense what you said.
Okay. We got 5 minutes left in the show. Is this a show? Whatever. We're recording it. We're going to play a little bit of buy, sell, hold. So this is, would you buy this? Like, are you generally upward trending? Would you sell it? It's downward trending, or hold it, just hold on to it. So I'm going to name a product, and let's just do, thumbs up for buy, like this for hold, and thumbs down for sell. So first item up, Premier sealed boxes. All right, so we got 2 buys and 2 holds.
Darth Vader chase card.
Premier Seal Premier just sucks. I'm just gonna say it. It's my hot take of the day. It's just such a boring set.
Chasing the Vader will forever be fun.
Greg,
and high value.
Why are you a hold with me?
I have mixed feelings about sealed generally. I have like this radical position that Mark and Cam are going to hate me for, which is that all the sealed should be opened. Yeah. So I don't even, my answer doesn't really mean much other than like Greg is struggling with all the sealed out there that can't be played.
I mean, yeah, like if you were to look at the chart over the last year or two, actually Premier hasn't actually performed as well as say some of the other sealed boxes in terms of going up in price. But I think, the chase particularly, and it is pretty rough, honestly, when you're trying to open the packs. Like you just buy a couple of random Premier packs, good luck. But the chase, even after I've opened, like, I don't even know how many Premier boxes, I still get that same thrill of trying to hunt the Vader. So I think you're always just going to have that. We'll try to open all the boxes, Greg. Just the only caveat is I'm going to try to lock up all those mains in carbonate. So to say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. The next item we have, this is a bunch of items, but full sets Premier to Special Edition. All right. We have 3 holds and a sell. I think this stuff was just a ton of it printed. There's a ton of it out there. Endless shoe boxes filled with, cards from these, 7, 8 sets. I'm a sell. I think a hold. Any big thoughts on these? It's a great way to start playing the game, right?
Fun to look through and flip through from time to time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I bought the sets from someone, I'd probably be buying them with the intent of getting the mains and, again,
grading
broken
the main
record. Yeah. So,
not that I love flipping through Special Edition and reminding myself all the weird Cantina aliens that like your cards.
That's the best utility value right there.
Yeah.
I mean, great to play with. A really good format, fun format to play. All right, Ender foils.
I think I'm still. Yeah, they're one of my favorites.
They look so nice. They really
look nice, and I still think a full foil set for like $175, which I think is where it's at roughly, it's pretty cheap considering the rarity. Like when you come down to it, like Endor, the ultra rare foils or whatever they were called, very extremely rare, were just like very hard to pull. Like, and I think they're also iconic. There's grading value, there's crossover. So big fan of the Endor foils.
As a set, they seem to sell for surprisingly less than the sum of the individual cards. Just like that. The General Solo, the 3PO,
those are each like $70 cards.
Yeah, they go for quite a bit. The Daughter of Skywalker. There's just maybe only 4 cards that actually go for anything reasonable, but still they seem to. The sets themselves, I think, are reasonably priced compared to the singles.
Yeah, I agree. All right, next one. Reflections 2 premium cards.
Outside of Luke and Emperor. Oh, premium. Premium.
Yeah, premium.
I immediately went to
the Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Yeah.
This kind of brings up a comment that Greg wrote. It is why doesn't I feel like Greg, why doesn't Reflections 2 sell for more? It seems like there's some really high valuable singles in there. It's a great set overall. A lot of utility cards, useful. It seems kind of undervalued. Do you have a thought on this?
I don't have a thought. I mean, you said it. I mean, it's like I think I agree with everything. Like my thumbs up was more of like a hope. Like it's like I don't understand why the set sells for as low as it does. There's so many good cards. It's a great set. Many of the cards go for a decent amount. I don't know if it's just because it's expanded universe. And not enough of players or collectors were into it. But yeah, I'm sort of baffled by why that set doesn't go for more.
I think that people are scared of what Disney's going to do to the Zahn novels and the old expanded universe. Like, do I want to invest in Mara Jade and Dash Rendar? I do. I've read all the Zahn novels and I love them. And I'm, on that side of please bring it back. And to that point, we're going to see Thrawn in Mandalorian very soon.
Or it'd be Ahsoka, maybe. I don't know if it'll be Ahsoka or, whatever, somewhere.
Theoretically, yeah. I mean, between Rebels, he's there. And so, you could argue it's a very intelligent asymmetric risk speculative move to grab up some Mara Jades or a character you think from Shadows of the Empire that could pop up in a Disney show.
Yeah.
Just real quick, I do think they're good. It's just the one thing that kind of hurts it a little bit is they made the foil variants of many of them in Reflections 3. So the collectors might just, again, going with like the shiny thing. It's like, well, there is the Reflections too, but I want to collect one that's shiny, and here's a shiny version of the card. So it might still be underpriced relative to where it should be, but I think that just hurts it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, really, all the best cards in it, they did make a shiny version of. So that's a really great point. Okay, last couple here. Japanese cards. I feel like I'm like the Emperor from Gladiator, just, all right. We got 4 holds. I think we're all kind of on the same page here. This is also coming from a guy who just bought Japanese cards today, but
trying to bring down the market so you can get some.
Highly speculative.
Yeah.
All right, next one, Stormtroopers.
Yes. No risk.
At a penny a piece, I will buy as many Stormtroopers as I can.
I actually put that on because the funny thing is, I bet if someone, and it will happen one of these days, if someone can get a PSA 10, like Black Border Stormtrooper, I don't know how much that card's going to go for, but it's a lot more than probably a lot of rares.
Than like the grading cost, right?
$42.69.
That's it's actually highly likely. We'll see. It's one of these days.
Does anyone want to call an audible and do one more of these, or that's all on my list?
I have ideas, but I don't really want to put them out there because it may be
they're too radical.
I'll just PSA 10s. Just you can't get it. That's the ultimate chase.
Yeah.
People are always going to chase the unobtainable, which is what a PSA 10 or any highly graded card should be. So that's everything I got on my list, guys. This has been a tremendous amount of fun hanging out. Any kind of final thoughts from anybody that they want to share before we close?
I don't know. It's been really good. I don't know. It's been 3 months since we did one of these, and it's been a great experience. And hopefully, we can get some of these tools out and people continuing to grow the market. And hopefully in another 3 months we'll reconvene and I don't know, talk about how lively it is. That's my hope and dream. Yeah,
that's actually my closing thought is, my interest isn't in growing the price, right? My interest is in growing the market, right? That I want more people caring about this stuff like I do, so I seem less crazy to my friends and family, right? So I just want more sales, even if the sales are flat. Like, I think generally that's the sign of a healthy market, and I want this to be a healthy market. So that's sort of my closing thought and hope for the rest of the year. We'll probably do an update after Christmas or something and see what the holiday season's brought. Anything else from the group?
I mean, this has been super fun. I always enjoy chatting with you guys. I'm looking forward to what things are going to look like a few months from now when we do this again. And I really hope people use these resources that we, I'm psyched for people to listen or watch us and hear what we have to say, but I also hope they dig into these things and use them as needed. And, also I personally welcome feedback on the spreadsheet. So if there are things that are missing on or things that would be helpful, people should feel free to reach out, and no promises, but I'd be curious if folks think there's things that would be missing that would be easy for me to incorporate.
So guys, comments, anything you want changed or tools or questions, please put them in the comments of the video. If you made it to the hour and 4 minute mark, then bless your heart. We're so happy that folks like to listen to this stuff, and it's a lot of fun to make. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.
May the force be with you.